Hi all! I'm not very familiar with ASMR, Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response, but I thought I could create this video that might be of interest to people that are familiar with it or experience it. I don't experience it myself. I wish I did because it seems like it's really cool. Today I will be reading Educational Psychology, the third edition, by O'Donnell, Reeve, and Smith. I will be beginning in the middle of Chapter 8, Social Learning Theory, Complex Cognition, and Social Constructivism. I'm just picking up from where I left off. I'm sorry I'm not beginning at the beginning of the chapter. Alright, so you might be able to hear the clock and my dogs walking around, but I will begin in a moment. I might move the bowl. Alright. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I have trouble concentrating when I'm reading, so I thought that this could be a win-win situation. I read while you like listening to this. I'm not sure. All right. Promoting problem solving in the classroom. Each step of problem solving can pose difficulties for students. In order to promote effective problem solving in the classroom, a teacher must help students develop strategies for problem solving and create a supportive environment in which students are willing to take academic risks. The teacher should encourage students to generate different representations of the problem. Imagine students are given the following problem. A man wishes to increase the amount of light in his room. He has one window that is 2 feet wide and 2 feet tall. He is not allowed by his landlord to change the dimensions of the window. What can he do? In attempting to answer the question, a student might represent the window as either a circular window or a square window. In both cases, the height and the width of the window would be 2 by 2 feet. A teacher can encourage students to experiment with different strategies for solving problems. In order to help them generate such strategies, she should encourage them to think of other ways to do things and have students explain their ideas to others. A student should also reduce anxiety about being wrong by providing positive feedback on efforts to generate alternatives or interesting strategies. Reducing the contingencies associated with correct answers will encourage more exploratory behavior on part of the students. And I will be highlighting for my studying purposes. Transfer. The goal of learning is not only to be able to perform a strategy or skill or to remember something, it is also to be able to apply those skills, strategies, or knowledge in new contexts. This is called transfer, the ability to use previously learned skills or information in a new context. There are a number of ways in which to distinguish different types of transfer. Low-road transfer is the automatic application of previously learned skills. An example of low-road transfer would be using a pencil rather than a pen to write. In this example, a learner would give no conscious thought to the task and would not need to engage in metacognitive activity such as monitoring in order to accomplish the task. High-road transfer involves deliberative application of knowledge learned in one context to another. An example of high road transfer would include trying to identify whether the math problem you are faced with is similar to one you have done before. In this example, you are deliberately searching for prior knowledge that might be useful to solve the current problem. Positive transfer occurs when prior knowledge or skill is successfully applied to a new context. For example, individuals easily transfer knowledge of one word processing program to another. Negative transfer occurs when learning one skill impairs performance on another. For example, learning one kind of notation for statistics may interfere with one's ability to learn effectively if a different teacher uses different notation. Transfer does not readily occur. An example of the difficulties associated with transfer can be found in a study conducted by Karaher, and Schliemann. They investigated the mathematical strategies used by Brazilian children who worked as street vendors. After recording the nature and accuracy of the computations in which the children engaged while selling their goods, the researchers asked the children to come to their laboratory. The children took a variety of mathematics tests that included the same numbers and mathematical operations as those they used as street vendors. The results showed that the children were 98% accurate in the practical context of selling, but only 37% accurate on the same operations in the laboratory context. This study showed the failure to transfer between real-life context and the classroom context. We are typically concerned about whether what is taught in school will transfer to real-life contexts. The Cognition and Technology group of Vanderbilt developed a set of problem-based curricula called The Adventures of Jasper Woodbury. Each Jasper adventure is situated in a real-life context and is complex, often including multiple subproblems. In one of the Jasper adventures, Rescue at Boone's Meadow, the focus is on mathematical concepts of distance, rate, and time. Jasper's friend Larry teaches Emily how to fly a plane. They also discuss their plans for a camping trip to Boone's Meadow. As the adventure develops, important embedded data are introduced. These data are facts and numbers that will be needed to solve the problem posed. For the Boone's Meadow problem, the embedded data include, The embedded data include information on who knows how to fly an ultralight plane, their weight, the weight of the plane, the plane's payload, gas consumption, and so forth. The key problem to be solved in this adventure is how to transport a wounded bald eagle as quickly as possible to the veterinarian. By embedding mathematics in a real-life problem context, the CTGV group sought to improve students' ability to transfer their mathematical skills. Evaluations of the Jasper series showed that Jasper students do as well as non-Jasper students on assessments of basic mathematical knowledge, but they score better on word problems testing transfer of the knowledge learned through Jasper and on their ability to identify what information needs to be considered in solving complex problems. Teachers can encourage students to transfer their knowledge and skills by reminding them to look for similarities between the tasks in which they are engaged and ones they have done previously. Students need opportunities to practice new skills. The teacher should provide feedback and remind students to consider the strategies they are using and how these strategies might be useful in the future. Finally, the teacher can provide problems that are very similar to one another, near transfer, then provide problems that are quite varied, far transfer. Students will need help to engage in the metacognitive activity necessary to do far transfer. Now I'm beginning to read the section Complex Cognition and Social Constructivism. And please excuse my mistakes. Social learning theory has its roots in behavioral learning theory. It describes how we learn from others, particularly by observing them and imitating their behavior. Social learning theory also includes cognitive elements because we must encode, retain, and retrieve knowledge of the model's behavior in order to perform that behavior. A natural extension of social learning theory is social constructivism. According to both social constructivism and sociocultural theory, learners construct knowledge in a social context. Constructivism is not a single theory of learning, but includes a number of theories in which view learners as active participants in constructing understanding. One kind of constructivism is similar to information processing in that the person creates a representation of what exists in the world. Moshman refers to this as exogenous constructivism. Students construct an understanding of what the teacher presents. Another form of constructivism describes the learner as constructing new knowledge from prior knowledge. Piaget viewed conceptual development from this vantage point. Learners use prior knowledge to make sense of new information. A third form of constructivism describes knowledge being constructed by the learner as a result of the continual interaction between the individual and his or her social world and environment. This type of constructivism is best illustrated by Vygotsky's theory. The source of knowledge from this perspective is subjective experience in interaction with the environment. Social learning theory, social constructivism, and sociocultural theory are all concerned with how we learn from others. Social constructivism and sociocultural perspectives on learning include both social and cognitive components. Vygotsky's theory of cognitive development argues for a dialectical relationship between the individual and the social context in which the child develops. The individual acts on the social context and changes it, and is subsequently changed by the new social context. The definition of dialectical relationship is a relationship in which the participants have mutual influence on one another, or in which the actor changes the environment in some way, and that changed environment subsequently changes the actor. Cognitive processes are modeled in the social world before the child can internalize them. Children interact with the adults in their world and gradually acquire the skills available in the community. Table 8.2 compares different constructivist approaches. Okay. I'm going to skip going over the table. Social constructivist and sociocultural theories of human learning emphasize 1. Social participation, 2. Authentic tasks in which learning is embedded, 3. Tools to support learning. Both theories place special emphasis on social participation. Learners are social beings who develop competence through participation in valued activities from which meaning can be derived. They integrate new knowledge with existing knowledge and actively interact with their environment. According to Vygotsky, a developing child acquires the skills available in the community by participating in activities with adults. The cognitive skills modeled by skilled members of the community are imitated and eventually internalized. The tasks in which learners engage are meaningful real-world tasks. In other words, they are authentic, and all participants have legitimate roles in performing them. For example, students might study the quality of the water in a local river. The Jasper Woodbury problem-solving series presents problems based on real-world situations. In one of Jasper's adventures, students see a video about how architects try to solve a community problem, such as designing safe places in which children can play. The video ends with a challenge to design a safe playground for the neighborhood. To solve such problems, students must bring a complex set of skills to the task. Identification with the community or group is a key element of socio-cultural approaches to learning. When individuals participate in a valued activity together, they may experience collective efficacy, a jointly held belief that they are effective when they are working together. The processes of identification and the experience of collective efficacy are important motivators for learning. Sociocultural theory suggests that the tools found in a society, e.g., library corners and classrooms rather than desks bolted together in rows, reflect how the society solves problems and thinks about certain issues. The artifacts or products created by a community suggest the strategies developed by its members to solve particular problems and support the thinking and activities of its members. For example, most people in the United States know what a dishwasher is. It is a machine in which dishes can be placed after use. When operated, it cleans the dishes. The average American home may have a dishwasher. In such homes, the sink unit consists of a stainless steel basin with faucets embedded in a countertop. In countries where having a dishwasher is the exception rather than the rule, kitchen sinks include the standard basin and faucets, but are also designed with a built-in draining board on one side of the basin. It is expected that dishes will be washed by hand and left to dry. In contrast, one might never see such a sink unit in an American home because it is expected that a dishwasher may be available. The construction of these sink units reflect how the cultural practices of a community influence the design of objects produced in that community. These, in turn, affect how activities are carried out in that community. Development is assisted through the use of tools or artifacts generated by the culture. Previously, you read that the primary tool by which meaning is communicated among members of a community is language. Tools such as computers, video cameras, calculators, and mobile phones embody the expertise of their designers and the values of the cultures in which they are used. Cognitive activity is distributed, or shared between the individuals and the tools they use. The tools provide affordances or support for particular kinds of cognitive activity. They allow members of the community to act in ways that would not be possible without the tool. For example, a student who uses a calculator does not need to use working memory to engage in mental computations. The student thus frees up cognitive resources that can be devoted to other aspects of the task. Consider how people's communications and activities have changed as a result of the continued development of the telephone. Early telephone systems had party lines. Numerous members of a community had access to the same phone line. These systems made possible not only the intended behaviors of communication, but also unintended behaviors such as eavesdropping on other people's conversations. Telephone booths were originally designed to enable two people to hold a private telephone conversation. This was particularly true in England and other countries where telephone booths were enclosed boxes in which the person making a phone call could close the door and thus maintain privacy. The advent of cell phones has greatly changed the nature of communications. People can make phone calls whenever they wish and from almost any location. Their phones are not simply devices to allow one person to talk to another, but may also include text messaging systems, access to the internet, music players, video cameras, and other functions. The cell phone no longer affords privacy as a necessary property of the communication between people as the phone booth once did. In sum, the tools or artifacts produced by a community support certain kinds of thinking and make it possible for its members to engage in activities in which they might otherwise be unable to participate. Tools can also serve an important role in communications between the more competent and less competent members of a group. Learners can share knowledge and develop joint understanding more easily if there are visible, tangible objects that can serve as points of reference in solving problems or be used to assist communication. For example, if students in a high school chemistry lab can point to the effects of a chemical reaction, they have a shared representation of what occurred that will permit them to discuss their understanding of what happened. In distributed systems, responsibility for a task is shared among participating individuals. The focus is on participants engaging in activity, and the performance of the group as a whole can exceed that of each individual. Such a system is not simply a division of labor among members, but a collaborative activity in which knowledge and expertise are shared. Cognition in such instances is understood as jointly undertaken by individuals interacting with one another with surrounding physical, social, and intellectual resources. The tools available to the group may scaffold its members' performance and support their activity. For example, a group's use of presentation software can help individual students offer new ideas that add to the collective slideshow prepared by the group for presentation to the class. Examples of instructional forms that are influenced by social-cultural approaches to learning include the computer-supported intentional learning environment and communities of learners. The role of experience. The experiences that children have in their community make an important contribution to their cognitive development. Their activities may help them develop complex understandings. For example, in the study of child street vendors in Brazil mentioned earlier in this chapter, Sachs found that unschooled child street vendors had developed usable strategies for solving arithmetic and ratio problems involving large numbers. A comparison group of non-vendors had not developed such strategies. The experience of the child vendors had helped them develop strategies for carrying out their daily work. Similarly, Jurdak and Shahin found that child vendors in Lebanon were more effective in using logical mathematical skills in solving problems with transactions or word problems than they were when solving computation problems. Sociocultural theories of learning recognize the crucial role of cultural practices to which children are exposed in their cognitive and social development. Instruction is likely to be most effective when it takes account of students' previous experiences and interests. The Algebra Project 2005 is an example of an instructional project that is embedded in students' experience. The target students for the Algebra Project are students in underserved rural and inner city areas, primarily African American and Latino communities. The goal of the project is to help students gain the mathematical skills necessary for college preparatory math classes. The Algebra Project helps students develop mathematical understanding through a process that begins with familiar concrete experiences, e.g., taking a ride on the subway, and moves from there to more abstract mathematics, e.g., the concept of displacements. One of the curricular units developed by the Algebra Project is the African Drums and Ratios curriculum. It is based on the examination of rhythmic concepts and cultural features of African drum traditions. Students learn ideas about pulse, harmonic rhythm, and other rhythmic concepts, which are then used to help them understand such concepts as ratio, proportion, fractions and measurement, and equivalence. Interesting. Students make their own drums and create percussion compositions. They learn to recognize drum patterns and relationships and represent them in mathematical terms. The curriculum has high interest value for students. Efforts have also been made to engage students in learning by situating learning activities within their cultural experience. Eglash has described the presence of concepts of fractal geometry in many facets of African culture. He has been working with African American math teachers to find ways to increase minority students' interest in math. In one example of a culturally situated instructional activity, Eglash describes how African cornrows or braids illustrate four geometric concepts: translation, rotation, reflection, and dilation. Never mind. It's about a figure, but we're not going to go over it. This and similar instructional approaches try to take advantage of the fact that students are likely to be more motivated when the concept of instruction is personally relevant and meaningful to them. Scaffolding. Socio-cognitive development occurs at two levels. The first level is face-to-face interaction between less competent and more competent members of a group. The second way is through the culture's history and technology. The more competent member scaffolds the learning of the less competent member. The learner and guide jointly create a zone of proximal development in which the learner is able to perform at a level that he or she could not achieve without assistance. For example, a parent may study a child's hand as she practices cursive writing, or an older sibling may study a bicycle as a child learns to ride it. Scaffolding is simply Scaffolding is more than simply providing help. Wood and his colleagues described scaffolding as a process that enables a child or novice to solve a problem, carry out a task, or achieve a goal which may be beyond his unassisted efforts. An important aspect of scaffolding is the eventual fading of the support so that the child can perform the task on his or her own. Once the learner has a grasp of the target skill, the master reduces or fades his participation, providing only limited hints, refinements, and feedback to the learner, who practices successively approximating smooth execution of the whole skill. A child who is learning to ride a bicycle often begins with the aid of training wheels that provide balance. The child may be further supported by an adult who studies the bicycle. As the child develops the skills needed to ride the bicycle, the supports are gradually removed. The adult may allow the child to depend solely on the training wheels. Eventually, these are taken off, and the child rides without support. The guide who provides scaffolding does so by engaging in 3 activities: channeling, focusing, and modeling. Channeling of the learner's activities and focusing of the learner's attention involve providing constraints during the task so that the learner is more likely to perform it effectively. An example of software designed to channel and focus student learning is World Watcher, a tool for displaying and analyzing gridded geographic data in the form of color maps. Students are given access to sets of climate data that are relevant and manageable in size. However, these data sets are constrained in that they are simpler than the complete data would be. The guide focuses the learner's attention by identifying important features of the task. This helps maintain the learner's progress toward completing the task. The guide also models some of the steps involved in completing the task. Previously, we discussed how students are able to learn from models. The guide who provides scaffolding to a learner takes advantage of this ability by modeling aspects of the task. 2 major steps are involved in scaffolding. Instructional plans must be developed to lead students from what they already know to a deep understanding of the new material, and the plans must be carried out, with the teacher providing support at each step. Appleby and Langer identified the following 5 features of appropriate instructional scaffolding. 1. Intentionality. Each instructional activity should help the learner accomplish the task. 2. Appropriateness. The task is difficult enough so that the learner needs help. 3. Structure. The teacher models strategies and asks questions that are examples of appropriate ways to approach the task. 4. Collaboration. The teacher is the learner's partner, not his or her judge. The teacher needs to welcome the learner's efforts and redirect the learner when necessary. Internalization, number 5. The teacher's support is gradually withdrawn, and the learner can perform the task alone. The concept of scaffolding is central to Vygotsky's theory and important for classroom teachers. It will be helpful to identify specific acts of instruction that constitute scaffolding. Carefully consider the following 18 scaffolding acts listed under the headings of planning: structuring the learning situation for the student and modeling expert skills; coaching, social guidance, instruction, and collaboration; and fading, the transfer of responsibility for problem solving from the teacher to the ever more proficient student. Okay. Planning. Choosing activities, deciding which skills are to be encouraged, such as reading books and writing letters. Planning and structuring, setting up the learning situation. Selecting task difficulty. modifying or simplifying a complex task to adjust it to the student's current level of readiness and skill. Defining the learning goal. We're going to learn square roots today. Scripting task involvement. Identifying the sequence of steps required for carrying out the task. Modeling the activity for the novice. Coaching. Offering tips, hints, pointers, and assistance. Suggesting task strategies of which the student is unaware. Helping the student maintain pursuit of the goal by calming frustration and supporting interest and effort. Offering reminders, prompts, what happens next? Assisting well-timed questions and making well-timed suggestions. Explaining why a certain procedure will work best. Showing nonverbal cues indicating proficiency and improvement. Glances, smiles, and the like. Lastly, fading. Monitoring the student's need for assistance. Decreasing the explicitness of instruction. Transferring the center of decision-making from the teacher to the collaborative pair, then to the student. Pausing more and talking less. Listening and answering questions rather than instructing and guiding. An instructional example of scaffolding. Scaffolding can be carried out in a variety of ways. P noted that the term scaffolding is used very broadly to describe various kinds of support or help in a learning situation. In its most formal sense, the term refers to a process that includes deliberate fading of teacher support after some time. Informal uses of the concept of scaffolding involve assisting the student's current performance. Figure 8.5 presents an example of instructional scaffolding. An additional example of scaffolding is the use of procedural facilitation in writing instruction. Procedural facilitation is a structured approach to improving students' use of elements of the writing process. The goal is to help students move from knowledge telling to knowledge transformation. In one study, students were given cue cards that contained procedural prompts for each task goal. They were also given specific prompts in the form of starter sentences to help them think about their writing. For example, a cue card might list a task goal as improving an idea, and the students might be given a specific prompt about how to do this. For example, I can make my point clearer by. The performance of 6th grade students who used planning cues and think aloud modeling strategies was compared to that of a comparison group of 6th graders who used more typical methods of generating ideas and producing text. Students in the experimental group produced high-quality written compositions and are more reflective than students in the control group. I'm going to turn on the light. One moment. Where did I leave off? Right. Scaffolding with technology. Students need a great deal of assistance in learning how to give appropriate help to peers. Efforts have been made to scaffold complex cognitive activities by providing support in computer-based environments. Technology-supported scaffolds can provide task structure or automate aspects of the task. They can also be used to reduce the cognitive load involved in the task. Web-based inquiry science environment. Inquiry-based, computer-supported science environments help students learn while doing. Students conduct investigations, interpret the results, and communicate them to others. An inquiry-based environment allows students to engage in scientific processes that are similar to those in which scientists engage, as well as to develop a deep understanding of the nature of science. The web-based inquiry science environment, WISE, W-I-S-E, is an online science learning environment for use by students in grades 4 through 12 as they learn about and respond to scientific controversies. Software is provided to help students navigate the web pages that contain content, notes, and hints. Together, these features of WISE guide students as they reflect on the content. An example of a WISE project involves cycles of malaria. Students learn about the nature of the disease, where it is found, and how it is spread. They compare a number of strategies for controlling the spread of malaria. Students are provided in the form of hints and tools for visualizing data. An example of a WISE environment can be seen in Figure 8.6. The goals of WISE are to make science accessible by using topics and models that students understand, to make thinking visible by using visualizations and representations, to help students learn from one another by using collaborative tools, online discussions, and group projects, and to promote autonomy with reflection, critique, argument comparison, and design activities. These features focus on authentic tasks, collaborative activity, and meaning. Biology-guided inquiry learning environment. BGuile, B-G-U-I-L-E. The biology-guided inquiry learning environment involves investigations in which students build empirically supported explanations from a computer-simulated dataset. Scaffolding is provided by features of the environment that offer guidance about which actions to take, the order in which they are to be done, and the required aspects of work products, such as explanations. The BGuile software serves as the context for investigation, providing access to the primary data and tools for analyzing and explaining them. In addition, the informal and structured discussions are interspersed through the activities to provide opportunities for reflection and for sharing and critiquing ideas. For example, the struggle for survival, one of the BGuile learning environments, helps middle school students learn about the ecosystem and natural selection by investigating a crisis in the Galapagos Islands. The student's task is to explore what is killing many of the animals on the islands and whether there is a pattern that explains how some of the animals have managed to survive the crisis. The problem gives students a chance to apply and extend their knowledge about species, interactions, and relationships between structure and function, and natural selection. Figure 8.7 and 8.8 present examples of what students see as they work with BGuile. Figure 8.7 shows the explanation constructor, a computer-based science journal that students use to construct scientific explanations. As students work on an investigation, they record their primary research questions and other questions as they emerge. They construct explanations and link them to the research questions and evidence that might be used to support the explanations. Figure 8.8 illustrates artifacts created in the Animal Landlord software. Using the software, students study examples of animal behavior. They isolate and analyze key components of the animal's behavior. Students select frames from a digitized video, categorize the behavior using a behavioral taxonomy, and annotate them with their interpretations. Much of the research on inquiry-based learning environments focuses on how software tools can scaffold learners' inquiry activities as they complete complex tasks. The software might provide attempts to encourage students or remind them of what steps to take. The availability of graphical organizers or Other representational tools can help students plan and organize their problem solving. The software can also automate lower-level processes and provide representations that help learners track the steps they have taken. The software makes the methodological aspects of the task explicit by helping students progress through the task and focusing their attention on important conceptual distinctions. The second type of research conducted with inquiry-based learning environments examines how students perform on a task before and after using the software. Research with Struggle for Survival shows some initial evidence that high school students working with the unit become better at writing scientific explanations. In particular, the data suggest that after completing the unit, students make fewer unwarranted inferences and are better at formulating coherent explanations. Similar results were found with the Animal Landward software. A comparison of pre-test and post-test essay questions also found that the essays on the post-test contained more casual arguments and justified more points than did essays on the pre-test. Scaffolding for students with special needs. Students with special needs often need a great deal of support when performing academic tasks. One strategy of providing that support is to use assistive technologies. In Section 602 of the Reauthorization of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, assistive technology is defined as any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether acquired commercially off the shelf, modified, or customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities of a child with a disability. Many assistive technology tools do not scaffold a student's learning in the way described by Vygotsky. They help the student communicate or participate, but the student remains unable to perform the tasks without assistance. One example of assistive technology that can be used to scaffold the learning of students with special needs is text-to-speech software, TTS. TTS uses voice synthesis software to provide oral reading of standard electronic text files, such as documents prepared in a word processor or text on web pages. Students who struggle with reading can benefit from using TTS. In a survey of instructors of college students with disabilities, TTS was rated as very useful. Research on the use of TTS in support of learning is not very extensive, but preliminary findings are promising. College students with attention deficit disorders and below grade level reading scores spent less time reading and were less distracted when using TTS. Positive effects on reading comprehension were found in a number of studies. Text-to-speech software can reduce the demands on working memory experienced by students as they struggle to learn